Good afternoon. We will begin with the refuge and bodhicitta prayers. O sangye chedan sogi chonam la chancho pardo dane chapsum che dage jin sogi be sonam ji Drola penjir sanje drobar sho sanje chedang sogi chonam la chancho pardo dane chapsum che dage jin sogi besanam je drola penjir Sanje drobar sho sangye chedan soge chonam la chancho pardane chapsum che dage jin soge besanam je drola penjir sanje drobar sho until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings. May all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they dwell in the highest joy, which is free of all suffering. May they never be parted from the great equanimity, which is free of attachment or aversion for those near and far. In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings so that our minds may become the Dharma. Please bless us so that Dharma may become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. Now think to yourself that the sufferings of samsara come in so many different forms. They all come out of karma. Not all come out of karma. Many of them come out of karma. Some of them come out of our own stupidity in the moment. But many of the sufferings of samsara are the ripening of our karmas. And if we don't want to experience suffering, then we have to avoid doing the things that are going to create more suffering for ourselves and others. And in order to do that, we need to understand what sort of actions are going to bring suffering to ourselves and suffering to our others. And if we truly want to be free of suffering and the actions that cause suffering, then the only way to truly do this is by achieving Buddhahood. Even the arhats are subject to some degree of suffering. Very slight suffering, but some degree of suffering. They can go crazy. They can be beaten up and murdered. There are stories of these in the sutras and in the Vinaya, and we'll go over this a little bit today. So if even achieving arhatship is not total freedom from suffering, is not total freedom from, of course the arhats don't see it as suffering, they don't experience it in the same way as us. So in one sense you say, yes, they're free of suffering, but they're still getting beaten up and murdered. They're still occasionally going insane when there are imbalances of the elements. And so if this can happen to you even when you're an arhat, is this really enough? And if this happens to us, what about all those other sentient beings who experience it? And so for that reason, we need to understand karma, not just for ourselves, but for all sentient beings, and to bring true freedom from it. True freedom from the suffering of samsara. We need to really understand karma, and this way we'll be able to help ourselves and help others truly, not just in a temporary fashion, but in a lasting fashion. And so for that reason, we need to study karma. This way, when we look at the teachings of karma, they're really something that, if we're going to truly understand it, the motivation of at least wanting to free yourselves from samsara, and best is freeing all sentient beings from samsara. If we can listen with either of these two motivations, then we'll truly be able to get some benefit out of the teachings. Otherwise, it's merely just listening to words. And so please listen with one of these two motivations of either bodhicitta or of a wish for emancipation. That is what's often translated as renunciation, the wish to free yourself from samsara. If you don't have a wish to free yourself from samsara, then you can't really have a wish to free others from samsara, because you obviously don't see samsara as so bad if you don't want to free yourself from it. If you think you want to stay in samsara merely to improve it, then you haven't really realized what its nature is, because all the improvements we can make in samsara come with an expense. Suffering for others at the time, more suffering for ourselves later. And so we need to wish to free ourselves from samsara. We need to realize that samsara is a pit of suffering that we have to get out of. We have to do whatever we can to get out of it. Otherwise, it's just going to keep happening over and over again. And so it's really important to have this recognition of the nature of samsara that then drives you to feel like you have to liberate yourself. And if you are on the bodhisattva path, you realize that you can only liberate yourself truly if you liberate others. And so it becomes a way to develop bodhicitta. If you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to help others achieve liberation, but meanwhile I'm going to enjoy my expensive coffee at the coffee shop, if your coffee shop is even open these days, then it's, it's still not quite there yet. We've got further to go. Anyways, we start with the motivations we have. It's important to contemplate these teachings on karma for the reason of developing that wish for freedom, first of all, and then understanding how our actions work so we can then really see what we need to give up. When we talk about the Four Noble Truths, we give up we need to give up the truth of suffering. How do we give up the truth of suffering? By knowing it. How do we, and when we know it, then we see its causes. And so, how do we give up the causes? By truly knowing them. And what are the causes? They're karma and affliction. So we need to know what karma is. So, please listen with this motivation of the wish for emancipation and bodhicitta. The Dharma that we are listening to is the verses on the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, as explained by Wangchuk Dorje in his commentary, Youthful Play. Of the 8 chapters, we are discussing the 4th chapter, the chapter on karma. And within the chapter of karma, after the presentation of the brief presentation of karma, there is the section on understanding karma, which has identifying what karma is, mental karma, volition, and then what that creates, the karma of body and speech. Then there is a long section on the presentation of karma as according to the Great Exposition, and then there is an explanation of karma as explained in the sutras. And so this has general there is general teachings and specific explanations. And so we are in the section on the general teachings. That has 4 topics: the classifying in terms of cause and result, teaching the many enumerations of karma, which karma has how many results, and other presentations of karma. So we're still talking about the first, the classifying in terms of cause and result. And in terms of the classifying in terms of cause and result, you can talk about it in terms of result, in terms of cause, or in terms of both cause and result. And actually, we're still talking about the first one, even though we've been talking about this for now several days. So classifying in result, in terms of the result, has 4 topics. Classifying as 3 as virtue, classifying in 3 as merit, and classifying as 3 by experience, and then the explanation of the latter 2. And it's that 4th topic that we are still discussing. So in the discussion of experience, we come down to a subtopic, a couple of layers. I'm not going to go through all the levels, but we are on page 336 of the book. So if you have the PDF, you can look on page 336. If you have downloaded the ebook, then you can go to verse 57 of the 4th chapter, verse 57. This is talking about the other ways that the karma and result can be experienced. So we've talked about experience of result in terms of the 4 different types of experienced as pleasure, experienced visibly experienced on birth, experienced in other lifetimes, and experienced in not definitely experienced. And then we've also talked about it being experienced as pleasure, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. But there are other ways that karma can be experienced. And so these are described here. So first is in terms of the way that the feelings are experienced. So there are 4 points. So teaching the other ways karma and result can be experienced has 4 points. And the first of these is the way that feelings are experienced. So we have how the feelings that are fully ripened results of karma, how are they experienced? Because we can have feelings of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, mental pleasure, or mental displeasure or unhappiness. So of those 5, so here we're first talking about, so here the question is about feelings of the mind first, because of the feelings of the mind, a feeling of happiness may be a ripening of karma. A pleasant mental feeling may be a mental karma. However, unhappiness, displeasure is not a result of karma. It is, as this is explained in the 2nd chapter, and the reason for displeasure not possibly being a fully ripened result of karma is because it is always either virtuous or negative, or virtuous or unvirtuous. Fully ripened results of karma are always neutral. So when you have a feeling of mental displeasure, that is naturally not the full ripening of karma. Now, it can come from karma in a very sequential sort of way. So there are different ways that things come out of karma, and that's part of what we'll get to today. But it's not the full ripening of karma. And this is an important distinction. And I think I've mentioned this a couple times, but this is why I'm mentioning it all the time. So here, the first of these 4 topics, 4 points, is the way feelings are experienced. So virtuous karma that is free of considering will fully ripen only as feelings in the mind. Non-virtue ripens on the body. So when we talk about the full ripening of karma, we're talking about primarily feeling, experience. You have some sort of experience, and then there are other things that are associated with the experience, as we spoke about the other day in terms of the 5 ways that karma is experienced. But it's primarily talking about the experience. We spoke about that in terms of it being inherent, concurrent, through the focus as full ripening, or directly manifesting in verse 49 the other day. So here, when we're talking about it ripening as a feeling, occasionally it can ripen as a mental feeling. So when is that? So here it says in the commentary, full ripening is primarily feeling. So is there any type that is only mental feeling and not bodily feeling? So if you're going to have a mental feeling, it has to be either mental pleasure or mental unhappiness, displeasure. Okay? One of those two. Now, we just discussed how mental unhappiness, unpleasant feelings in the mind cannot be the full ripening of karma, but the pleasant feelings of in the mind can. And so there is. So virtuous karma that is free of considering from the levels of the special dhyana to the peak of existence will fully ripen only as feeling in the minds or mental feelings, because body feeling is always accompanied by considering. So here's the point. When you have karma on the dhyana levels, not the first level of dhyana, but on the special dhyana and higher. On the special dhyana and higher, you don't have the mental factor of considering. That's present on the first dhyana, but not on the special dhyana, or on the second dhyana, or the second through fourth levels, or the formless realms. And because you don't have that, then it can't ripen. Then its result cannot ripen on the body, on the level of the body. It only ripens in the mind. Because body feeling is always considered by accompanying. So now the karma that's going to ripen on those levels is going to be immovable karma. So that would mean that there would be your practice of dhyana, your practice of the formless meditations. Right? So in the first jhana, when you achieve the first jhana, then you have mental feelings, and you also have the vows of jhana. So you have the physical karma there with bodily feelings. But so you gain the first jhana on this, but you have consideration concurrent with that jhana. So therefore, when you are reborn in the first jhana, you also still have consideration, so you can still feel that bodily pleasurable feeling. But when you get to the special dhyana and the higher levels of dhyana, then you don't have that consideration. So even though while you're practicing the dhyanas, you have the physical aspect in terms of the vows of dhyana, because those are imperceptible forms, the feelings only ripen in the mind. So they ripen as mental pleasure on the second dhyana and as cognitive pleasure on the third dhyana, or as neutral in the higher realm. So now that neutral feeling is not usually distinguished as either mental or physical, because neutral is kind of blah, and who can tell? If it's blah, you can't tell whether it's mind or body, as we discussed in the second chapter. So this implicitly teaches that the full ripening of virtuous karma on the first jhana and below is both mental and bodily feeling. So in the first jhana, when you feel the pleasure in the first jhana, that is the full ripening of doing the jhana while you're in the desire realm, right? So that's the full ripening of karma. You can also have pleasant experiences as the full ripening of karma in the desire realm. Then we have non-virtuous karma. Non-virtuous karma fully ripens on the body as bodily feeling only. So when you do a non-virtuous action, when it ripens on the body, it ripens as sensation only, bad sensations, as unpleasant situations. It is not mental, because the suffering of mind is mental unhappiness, which is not a fully ripened result, as was explained in the teaching on the faculties. So this was taught in the second chapter there. Okay. But now here there is a problem, because we have mental unhappiness, right? We also see that there are people who are disturbed, crazy, insane, or whatever we call them. So sometimes it seems like this has to have been a ripening of karma. How else could it have happened? It's not like that person did anything. They just, for whatever situation, they found themselves in a circumstance that made them go insane, or they were just born that way. There are people who, just for whatever imbalance in their body. So isn't that a full ripening of karma? And isn't that mental? This is the question. So if you have insanity, if you have craziness, or being really disturbed, then can't that also be a result of karma? If it's not, if the mental feeling of unhappiness is not a result of karma, then how can that insanity, which is probably often accompanied by unpleasant mental feelings, how could that be the ripening of karma? So that's the issue that we're discussing now. So it says, where the distracted mind is, distraught mind it should probably be. Actually, the whole terminology in this section is a difficult one, and I'll get to that in a moment. A distraught mind is mental mind. So a distraught mind here means a mind that is, essentially it means insane or crazy. Now the reason why I chose distraught in this translation, and I don't think I'd do it now 10 years later, but the reason why I did it is that when we're looking at the original source materials in Sanskrit, you've got the word for crazy and the word for distracted both come from the same root. You have chipta is crazy, and you have vikchipta is distracted. So they come from the same thing. So I was and there's a little bit of a play on these two words in the commentary. So I was trying to get a way of expressing that in English and thinking about, well, they don't really say, there are also words for crazy in Sanskrit, but they're not using the words for crazy. They are using this word that's related. Why aren't they using another word for crazy? So trying to be a little bit too literal, I chose distraught here. And distraught isn't quite right. Other translations choose disturbed, but you can be disturbed without being crazy, so disturbed is not right. What we definitely mean here are people who are going crazy, unfortunately. It means insanity. So probably when I revise this, I will change that mind, change that to something like insanity is mental mind. So that's what we're saying, that when you have insanity, among the 6 types of consciousnesses, the 5 sensory consciousness and the 6th mental consciousness, which is it? It's the 6th mental consciousness. Well then, the commentary asks it starts with a rhetorical question, where does a distraught mind come from? And what is its cause, you ask? So if mental mind, if the unpleasant feeling is not karmic, is not the full ripening of karma, then how do you get that? So a distraught, or that is a distraught or insane and crazed mind is the mental or mind consciousness. It is not in the consciousnesses of the 5 gates, because these do not think with thoughts that recognize and thoughts that remember. So basically, when we talk about the 5 sensory consciousnesses, we say that they are thought-free, non-conceptual thought-free, whichever term you want to use. And when we say that they're free of thought, this means that they don't have any thoughts that recognize something. So if the thought sees a flower, then if you have an eye consciousness that sees a flower, it's not going to recognize that flower and label it with the word flower. Now it can kind of distinguish the form, so we say it's got a subtle level of considering, but it doesn't have that full level of considering that would say, that is a flower, and give it that name flower. Nor does the I consciousness have any thought that remembers anything. So even though it does have a subtle level of considering and examining, it is said to be thought-free, just because it's free of thoughts that remember and thoughts that recognize. So what does insanity come from, essentially? And so that is what this next topic discusses. It says, what results produce that? It's born from fully ripened karma, from fear or harm, imbalance, sorrow. So here they're listing several different causes for insanity. One is fully ripened karma. Another is fear, harm, imbalance of the elements. So this would be basically physical disturbance, imbalances of bile, phlegm, and wind, and sorrow. So these are 5 different causes that are given here. So the distraught mind or insane mind, is born from being. Now here there's a mistake in the translation because I was looking at the Tibetan and I didn't look carefully enough at the other sources. It's not born from being confused by substances or mantras and so forth. It's actually from in a previous lifetime or in a previous period, whatever result of karma it is. At a prior time, you confused others with substances or mantras. In other words, you slipped someone a drug, or you cast a spell on them and caused them or a mantra and caused them to lose their mind temporarily. From giving intoxicants to someone who does not want intoxicants. So that means like slipping someone a drug in order to rape them or steal them or whatever you're going to do. So that has a particular karmic ripening. The other action, whether it's rape or stealing, would also have its bad karmic ripening. And from other full ripenings of karma, or other fully ripened karma, full ripenings of karma. So another one would be like if you light a forest fire. Because what happens to the beings in the forest, they're terrified of the fire, and so they try to get away from it. They're crazed by that terror. Or if you cast someone into an abyss, that's another cause given. And so other things. Basically, anything you do that causes mental distress to other beings can result in the full ripening in a full ripening that would then cause you to go crazy. So here the important point is that it's not that the insanity is the full ripening of karma. The full ripening of karma causes a situation that then causes insanity. So it's not a direct result of karma, it's an indirect result of the ripening of karma. So in this way we can say that when someone is just born crazy, that is a result of the full ripening of their karma, but it is not a fully ripened result. In other words, someone is born crazy because they're born with an imbalance in their system. Whether you think about it in the traditional terms of an imbalance of bile, phlegm, or wind, or whether you think about it in modern psychological terms as some problem with serotonin or whatever other chemical in the mind, whichever way you consider it, that is a full ripening of karma. That full ripening of karma then causes the craziness or the insanity. So that's one thing. So it's an important point that the insanity itself is not a full ripening because we're being very precise here, but it is the result of the full ripening. It is a result of karma that has fully ripened, or that is a result of the full ripening of karma. Does that make sense? Am I splitting too many hairs here for you? You guys are saying, oh, why can't you just say it's a result of the full ripening of karma? It's because it's accompanied with displeasure. And when you're feeling displeasure, that is either virtuous or unvirtuous. It is not the full ripening of karma. The mind is also made distraught from other conditions of the mind being adversely affected by fear, from seeing the ugly form of a non-human. So people traditionally would see spirits of various sorts, ugly spirits, and go crazy. People still have visions of these. We just say that they're crazy and that they're no spirits. They believed people that there were spirits before. Now we just don't believe them. People still have visions of terrible things. And so seeing that then inspires great fear. The harm of being stricken with illness or other pain. And harm, I think here, this is when you look at it and you think about it actually, in reading this section and the other commentaries this morning, it's not just not just being stricken by illness. I mean, we can think about it like people who have fled war zones and end up having PTSD, post-traumatic stress, from their experience being in a war zone. There's a fear that comes when they're being bombed or terrorized or whatever, and then because of that fear, they flee it, and yet they're distraught. They're crazy. So this is a problem of saying insane. I'm not sure you'd necessarily say that the person is insane, and I think this is why I just ended up using the kind of neutral term distraught, which doesn't really communicate the meaning quite, but it doesn't imply something. So as someone who has PTSD, are they insane? I don't know that we'd say that. So this is a difficult question. And it's an interesting one to think about because we have to think about the meaning here. There's all sorts of levels of mental disturbance. In fact, the ornament of Abhidharma translation says disturbed mind. But we also use the word disturbed mind to mean things that are not crazy, people who are just disturbed, or maybe sometimes it is. At any rate, there's that mental disturbance, that insanity, craziness can be temporary or long-term. So any experience that creates, any traumatic experience that causes someone to have psychological difficulties, you can say that's a cause of being distraught. An imbalance of the elements when agitated by wind, bile, or phlegm. So this would be talking about the physical conditions inside your body that then produce a reaction of insanity. And sorrow at the death of a beloved child. So when people lose their children and go crazy. So at the time of the Buddha, there was someone named Vasistha who had a son, and that son married a Brahmin girl from the same caste, or from the same clan. And they had 7 sons. And 6 of the sons died. Doesn't explain how they died. Now, the grandfather of Vasistha is named, but neither the son nor the daughter-in-law are named. She's just referred to as the Brahmin girl from the same clan throughout the story, and he's just referred to as the son. So neither of them have names, but the Brahmin girl from the same clan went crazy, and she totally lost it. She was in the city of Mithila. And after losing 6 children, her grief was so intense, she just lost it and left the home, was wandering around. She threw off her clothes and was wandering naked. And she came to a place near where the Buddha and his disciples were and was just so overcome with shame at being naked, and that she was just crouching, hiding herself. And the Buddha knew that it was time that she was ripe to be helped. And so he told Ananda, bring her an upper robe and then bring her here. And so Ananda went and gave her clothing, and she came in front of the Buddha. And he taught her the Dharma, and she listened, she understood, and she achieved the level of stream entry. And then she went back to her house, and when she went back, she saw her husband, and he said, well, while you were gone, our 7th son also perished. Excuse me, I got to get something here. I got to find what I'm looking for. Yeah. So our 7th son also perished, and she didn't grieve. She didn't lament. And he was surprised, like, what happened? When our other 6 children died, you lost it. You went crazy. You ran off, and you were running around naked. And here you're not even grieving. You're not lamenting or grieving. What's wrong? And what she said to him, Brahman, from a long time ago, thousands of children and grandchildren and many hundreds of my friends have I eaten, and you have too. There is no limit to the thousands of the children and grandchildren in those births who have eaten each other. Who in the world who knows they're emancipated from birth and death would be grieved by sorrow or wail in lamentation? I have followed the Buddha, and I know I am emancipated from birth and death, so I neither grieve nor lament. So when you think about it, thousands of children and grandchildren have we eaten, It's like, you think, wow, I don't eat my children, I don't eat my grandchildren, we think. But who knows what that, when we have children who pass away and then we meet, is that same child? We don't know. There's that famous story of the Buddha coming along and seeing a woman eating a fish and then laughing, and then Ananda asking why, and I'm getting the details wrong, and some relative of hers that had been reborn of the fish that she was eating. But also, in many other lifetimes, we were born as animals who are willing to eat their young. Crocodiles eat their young. Many animals eat their young. So we've eaten our grandchildren, children and grandchildren thousands of times, if not infinite numbers of times. And they've eaten each other. So this is just the nature. It's the nature of samsara that we go through. We have good connections with beings and we have bad connections with beings. In some lifetimes they're treasured, dear and treasured, or like our children, our grandchildren. What could you treasure more than your grandchild? And yet we don't recognize those beings that we don't think about in this lifetime. We don't think about them as being ours, but they were in the past, in other lifetimes. And so when you recognize that nature, that all sentient beings are really the same, then the death of all of them is really the same. They've all been our children. They've all been our grandchildren. This is a slightly different. Usually in the Tibetan tradition we talk about meditating on all sentient beings as being our mothers. But we can also think about them as having been our children and grandchildren, being people that we've cared for. So they're people we've cared for. And yet, those beings who were once dear and treasured to us are beings that we just don't care about. Oh, I squished a bug, so big deal, sorry. Or I had to eat some meat. I had to do this. What beings can have that? Which beings can become distraught or crazed or insane? How do we translate this? Sometimes it's temporary, the being distraught. Sometimes it's a longer term, something that's longer term. Temporary meaning temporary in the terms of this lifetime. It's always temporary. But who can have it? Who does it happen to? Which sentient beings can become distraught? It happens among the sentient beings who are attached. So all sentient beings who are still attached to the world can become distraught, can become crazed, can go out of their minds. Even in the peak of existence. But not in the northern unpleasant sound, not in the northern unpleasant sound. So the northern continent of unpleasant sound is a bit of it's kind of like a worldly paradise, but it's still worldly. I mean, if you have to be born as a human and don't care about liberation, that's the place to be reborn. But if you care about liberation, it's actually probably one of the worst places. At any rate, the reason why all beings, except those in unpleasant sound, can be crazed is, it says, if the gods can be crazed, what need is there to speak of humans, hungry ghosts, hell beings, and animals? So we can see it with humans. I'm sure all of you know people who are crazy or who've gone through periods of craziness. And many of us probably have already gone through periods of craziness. You go through a period of grief and you just feel almost insane. This is something we all experience and we see among humans. Something we see with animals. rabid animals, if you've ever seen a rabid animal, or whatever sort of animal. There are all sorts of crazed animals, animals that are running away from forest fires. And hell beings. The first moment that a being is born in hell, their mind is clear. They remember why they were born in hell. But then the suffering of hell just overtakes them. And they're constantly experiencing the pain of dying without ever actually truly dying. And all of the horrid things that happen to them in hell. The freezing and cracking apart in the cold hells, the fighting and the hot hells, and being stabbed mercilessly. They're experiencing all of those sufferings, and they experience it so much that they just go insane. I mean, look at what happens to people who experience terrible sufferings in the human realm. I mean, we now have a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. Why do we have that? It's because when people undergo sufferings, they go crazy. And so when a being is reborn in hell, not only are they experiencing the terrible suffering, the physical suffering of the hells, they're also, their minds are just totally crazed and distraught. They can't distinguish anything. As the commentaries say, there's no way they can know what they should do or what they shouldn't do because the suffering is so intense that they can't think. They're crazy. Except for the Bhagwan, nobles can be distraught because of imbalances of the elements, but they cannot be distraught by other causes or karma. So noble beings can experience, they can lose their minds, and this happens because of imbalances in the elements only, but not from the other causes. They cannot be distraught from fear because they have no causes of fear. They have no fear of losing the Dharma because they've already realized it. They have no fear of anything else because they realize the nature of their lives. So they can't become crazed through fear or through sorrow. They realize the nature of things, and so there's no way the noble beings can feel sorrow. And they can't because of the ripening of karma, because if the karma was going to ripen on them, if it was a definite karma, it would have already ripened upon them. They can only experience indefinite karmas, according to this passage. This is something that I need to compare with some of the earlier passages which suggest that the definite karmas can ripen on nobles. But that's just a picky point. Now, indefinite karmas, the ones that don't necessarily ripen, don't ripen on them when they are noble beings already. So that is the talking about the first of these sections of the classifying karma in terms of cause and result. So classifying in terms of the result was the first. Now we're at the section on classifying in terms of cause. In verse 59, the crooked, faulty, degenerate are born of deceit, hate, desire. Crooked is exactly what it would mean in English. Faulty is kind of an interesting one, and and when I was translating this, I was trying to be literal, and I think the other translators all trying to be literal. This is a word that we translate as wrongs often. The literal meaning of the word dosha, it's called nyepa in Tibetan or dosha in Sanskrit. The Sanskrit word literally does mean a fault. Nyepa can also mean a fault, but it also means a wrong. The crooked wrong, I think, and looking at the commentaries again, I feel like it's better to just not be literal, just do the meaning. The crooked, wrong, and degenerate are born of deceit, hate, and desire. So as taught in a sutra, there is karma of body, speech, and mind that is said to be crooked, that is said to be faulty or harmful, that is wrong or harmful, and degenerate karma. These are respectively karma born of deceit, so it basically come out of dishonesty. And this is karma that you do with body, speech, or mind that is dishonest. And there's karma that comes out of hate. The motivation is hatred. aversion. Hate is a strong word. This means any level of aversion from, aversion is very harmful because it's aversion and hatred that then promote us to do the acts that are the most harmful acts that we could do. And desire, the degenerate comes out of the desire. So we've got the crooked coming out of deceit, the wrong or faulty coming out of hatred, and degenerate actions coming out of desire. So desire, it's just like hard to get yourself away from it. It's like when you're painting on a wall. You fix the color on the wall, and once you've painted that wall, then it's hard to separate the pigment from that wall. It's like, so it's that saying that the desire just kind of sticks to it. The Tibetan word chakpa really shows it. Chakpa means like to stick, to join to something. So that's the second. So the first one, explaining in terms of, this is one of the things I like about these Tibetan commentaries. They don't worry about the sections being proportional. Now, if you're dealing with an English editor, the English editor would say to you, well, this section is so long, and this one's only one paragraph long. This is not proportional. You have to fix it. And the Tibetans don't care. So the whole section on the classifying in terms of result was what? It's 327 to 337. It's 10 pages, and then we have one paragraph on classifying in terms of cause. And now we have classifying in terms of cause and result. And this is a couple pages long. Okay. So this has two parts, an overview and an explanation. So 4 types of karma are distinguished as white and black, etc. So white and black are like pure and impure. It's hard to get this right in English. This is if you say white and black, on the one hand it kind of gets it according to traditional old English usage, but it is, I have been admonished since that this is a set of terms that people these days find difficult. For obvious reasons at our particular day and age. So it's a pure and impure might be okay, but we're using white and black today. Sorry. I can't retranslate the whole thing right now. And I'm just going to be easy. Otherwise, I'm never going to finish it. And I've got this whiteboard up because I wanted to get something where I was going to have to draw something on the whiteboard, and I don't know if I'm going to get there today. Well, we'll try. The sutras teach 4 types of karma that are distinguished as white karma that has a white full ripening, that is, good karma that has a good full ripening. Now, the reason not to use good and bad is that we're talking about white is like wholly good, wholly white. Black is like wholly bad. Black karma that has a black full ripening, etc., including mixed white and black karma that has a mixed white and black full ripening. Okay? So we've got white karma, black karma has white ripening and black full ripening, then the mixed white and black has a mixed white and black result. And then we have, because there are always 4 alternatives, there is that karma that is neither white nor black, and this is why we can't use the word pure. Karma that is neither white nor black, and that has a result that is neither white nor black. And what is that? That is the unstained or undefiled karmas. Okay. And that which is, so the mixed white and black karma that has a mixed white and black full ripening, and that which is neither white nor black and has no full ripening, but extinguishes karma instead. Okay, so those are the 4 types of karma. White and black, neither. So the explanation of this has 3 topics. There's a general teaching and then a specific explanation of the extinguisher and then presenting other traditions. So the general teaching is, what do we mean by white and black, and neither karma? Now, there are different presentations of this in different places, and so this is a particular one from this tradition, and we'll get to some other ones tomorrow. But in general, this tradition, when you talk about white and black, some people would say that white is virtue and black is non-virtue, and in fact, when you read many teachings on mind training and so forth, that's generally what they mean. generally what they mean in the teachings that you have probably read so far. But here, it is explained differently, probably according to a sutra, definitely according to a sutra. So the general teaching is non-virtue, virtue of form realm, and of desire respectively, are karma that is black, white, both. What douses them is undefiled. So non-virtue is karma that is black. So karma that is black. The karma that is black and has a black full ripening is non-virtuous karma, right? White means the virtue of the form realm. So why is that? It's because in the form realm there's no non-virtue. It's just wholly white. Okay, wholly good result. And of desire, the virtue of desire realm is both white and black. So, for example, if you give you make a gift or something in the desire realm, because we're in the desire realm and our beings are still a little bit, we still have attachment. Then there's the potential for the afflictions and so forth, and so the action is a little bit, what do you say, a little bit corrupted, shall we say, or a little bit stained by that. It's not purely white. The action on its own actually is inherently a virtue, but because of the continuum of the person who's doing it, still having anger, hatred, desire, and so forth, then it is said to be affected by that. So non-virtuous karma is always afflicted only and produces only unpleasant full ripening. So this is the non-virtuous, is the first, so that is black. The virtue itself of the form realm is not mixed with non-virtue and produces only pleasant full ripening. So in the form realm, there is no non-virtue in the form realm or in the dhyanas that lead to them. So therefore, it is white. It only leads to a pleasant full ripening. The virtue of desire is not mixed in its essence, but it appears mixed with non-virtue in one person's being. So when you do a virtuous action, the action is virtuous. There's no question, and it's in its own essence it is virtuous. But that person still has the kernels of the afflictions within their being, and so therefore the action is still afflicted. So its full ripening can be mixed with unpleasant full ripening of non-virtue. That means that when you experience it, for example, as I said the other day, if you are generous but do not practice discipline, you can be reborn a rich person's dog. Or you can be reborn the king of the Nagas, or you can be reborn as a rich, hungry ghost. Right? But a rich person's dog is something we can understand better in our current society, right? So respectively, these are the karma that is taught in the sutra that says, black the karma that ripens is black, white karma that ripens is white, black and white karma that ripens is both black and white. So here actually there's an interesting point, because we're talking about virtue. When you're doing it on the desire realm, you're doing a desire realm virtue. You have the non-virtuous afflictions in your being, so we're saying that is a mixed karma, right? But when we do a non-virtue in the desire realm, which is the only place you do for non-virtues, when you do a non-virtue in the desire realm, don't we still have the seeds of the virtues within ourselves? Most of us do. Some of us have. You can't. Some of us might not, but generally. So why don't we say that that black karma is also kind of grayish? And the reason that we don't say this is that within the desire realm, non-virtue is stronger. The afflictions are stronger in the desire realm. And the virtues are comparatively weak. So for this reason, in the desire realm, it is possible to sever the roots of virtue by having a wrong view. But it is not possible in the desire realm to completely eliminate all of the afflictions that would cause non-virtues, unless you achieve a higher level, and only to truly sever them if you have if you gain the undefiled meditations. And so, for that reason, the virtue is less potent than the non-virtue in the desire realm, which is also another reason why we see that good rebirths are few and far between. So that which does not have full ripening is not afflicted and discards or douses them, the other three karmas, is undefiled karma, which is described as karma that is neither white nor black, has no full ripening, and distinguishes other karma. So undefiled karma extinguishes all the white karma, that is the karma, the virtuous karma of the higher realms, and all the black karma, as well as all the mixed karma that would be the desire realm virtues. Because when you have that undefiled, then you're that undefiled wisdom, then you're no longer going to, then that acts as the antidote for both the black actions and for the white actions. So now we've come to a point, to the specific explanation of the extinguisher, and this is a point that's coming up that we'll actually go through the text on this tomorrow. But if you don't have a little bit of an understanding of the path as presented in this, then what we say tomorrow is just going to be like, what was that? So now I'm going to give you a brief explanation of the path, and you're going to go and you're going to look at it, oh no, what was that today? But when we get to it again tomorrow, then you'll remember a little bit more. So bear with me right now. So I'm going to have to use the whiteboard for this one. So how do I do this? We've got, let's see. It's easier to stand up. Okay. So is this working? This is not on. Oh, now it's on. Testing. Oh, now I've got it. Okay. So we have two types of paths. We have the path of seeing and the path of meditation, right? So we're going to start with the path of seeing. What is the path of seeing? It's when you see the nature of the Four Noble Truths. Actually, I'm going to even move this over a little bit so I can stand in between it. Here, this is easier for me as a righty. So path of seeing. I hope that all of you, I'm sure that our cameraman is now going to zoom in on this so you can see it. What are we seeing in the path of seeing? We're seeing the Four Noble Truths, right? So what are the Four Noble Truths? We've got suffering, origin, cessation, and path, right? So I'm gonna abbreviate those. Suffering, right? Easy, right? Origin, cessation, and path. Now, when we go through the path of seeing and we see suffering, origin, cessation, and path, we see them in order. First we see suffering, then we see origin. So suffering is what needs to be known. Suffering is known by clearly knowing it. And then when you know it, you see, oh, it has an origin. The origin must be discarded. How is the origin discarded? By clearly knowing it. And then you realize that when you have abandoned the origin, that then there is cessation. And cessation must be manifested. How is cessation manifested? By clearly knowing it. And then there is the path. So, how do you achieve cessation? It is by following the path. How do you follow the path? By clearly knowing it. Right? But within each of these, as we go through each of these four stages, we are eliminating the discards of seeing. Do you remember this term from the other day? Discards of seeing. That means the afflictions that are discarded on the path of seeing. So the discards of seeing. So they come in those of the desire realm and those of the two higher realms. Okay? So here we've got the discards of seeing. And so then we've got, let's see, how do we do this? Making my path. 3, 4. Actually, I should erase that. Oh, no, that was fine. Okay, so now let's get a different color here. So here we have for the desire realm. I'm just calling it D for desire, okay? And this is called form and formless, okay? Got that? Desire realm and formless. Now what we're going to do is, for each of these, we have 2 different stages. First you have a stage that is called the path of no obstacles, and that is what we call forbearance. And my box is too small to fit the word in. I'll just write like this. Nope. Forbearance. What this means is that there's a point where you can bear seeing the nature of the truth. We still can't really bear the idea of the truth of suffering yet. We can't quite accept it. There is a point, though, when you can really bear it. That's when you develop the wisdom to see its nature. And then after that, what comes after forbearance is knowing. So we've got forbearance and knowing. So forbearance means you can bear the knowledge, and then once you can bear the knowledge, in the next moment, you have that knowing. And then it's the same for the higher realms. Forbear and knowing. Okay, so now we've got our handy little chart here. But here's the trick. When we talk about it for the desire realm, we call it Dharma forbearance and Dharma knowing. Dharma. And then when we talk about it for the form and formless realms, we call it subsequent. So what this means is that when we go through the path of seeing, first we get to, the very first moment is the path of suffering, right? It's the truth of suffering. So we have the Dharma forbearance of knowing suffering, and once we get that, we develop that, and we develop that, and we're able to bear it, and so then at the next moment, all the discards are gone. So this is the moment when we discard the discards of seeing that are in the desire realm. Now at this point, we're in the desire realm still, because you can only develop this in the desire realm. So then you use inference as, it's like that in the desire realm, so it must also be the same in the form and formless. So that is the subsequent forbearance of suffering, and then there's a subsequent knowing. So in other words, there's 4 stages where you have the forbearance. At this point, the afflictions and the wisdom are simultaneous, and then at this point, you only have the knowing or the wisdom left. Then you have wisdom and afflictions of the higher realms that are simultaneous, and then they're all gone. Okay? Then you do the same for the desire realm. I don't know if this is the best symbol for it. It's just the one that came to my mind right now. So we go through each of these. We go through 4 of these. Right? They're all the same in the pattern. Now the difference is that you have slightly different attachments to each of the different categories of things. And so for that reason, in total, there are 4 stages for each of the 4 truths, so 16 different moments of clear realization. Okay? So when we look at it, the Dharma forbearance will eliminate all of the discards of desire, and then you have the freedom from the discards of desire. Then the subsequent forbearance will eliminate all of the discards of seeing for the for the form and formless realm, and then you have the 4 wisdoms for those. So that's the sequence. And the way you go through, that's too much the same. I'm trying to get the right colors. So first you go, oh, we already have that color. I'm trying to find colors I haven't got yet. There we have a color I don't have yet. So you start here. You go through here, all the way through here. Then you go back and all the way through here. Then you go back and all the way through here. And all the way through here. Okay? Does that make sense? So we have four truths and 4 stages for each truth. So basically what we're saying is the first stage of each truth that is the discard. Okay? Is that making it clear? That's the path of what? Path of seeing. And this is the reason why I did this year. Now I've got just enough room for the path of meditation. So here's the path of meditation, right? Now the path of meditation has to go through each of the 9 levels of the desire realm. So you've got desire, right? And then you've got form, the first of form, second of form, third. These are terrible abbreviations, aren't they? Then you've got infinite consciousness, infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and the peak. And so if we go through each of these, we have 9 different levels. Right, so we've got desire, 4 form, and 4 of the formless, right? Now for each of these, we have 9 different sets of discards. You kind of have to check off each of these boxes to go to the next realm. It's sort of like if you draw it out like this, it looks sort of like a game. You have to collect all of your cards or get rid of all the discards. Once you've gotten rid of the 9 sets of discards for the first, then you can check off this box, and then you can go check off this box, and then you can check off that one, each in order, all through all of the 9. And then there are 9 for the form. Except my pen is not working so well. When I sit and talk, it gets dry. So the first level of form has 9. Second level of form has 9. And so forth. They all have the same. I'm not going to write it in right now. Okay. So what this means is that as you are doing your meditation, you go through and you've gone through the path of seeing. You go through all the way through the path of seeing, and then when you get to this point, you're on the path of meditation. That's when the path of meditation starts. And then you go through, and you've got to start checking off these boxes. So you go through for the desire realm. At this point, you're a stream enterer, and then you start checking 1, checking 2, checking 3, and so forth and so forth. And once you have checked off this last one, then you're free of the desire realm, okay? And you're a non-returner. And then you go through and you check them all off for each of the subsequent levels of form and formless. And that way, when you get to the last one and you have the final one, and you check that off, you are an arhat. You have won the game. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so that's a brief presentation as a sort of game. What do we say? This looks like the sort of game that we used to have to draw out in grade school when we had to check boxes and things. So this is what, if you think about this as like that, that's a brief presentation of the paths of seeing and of meditation. You have to check them off in order. Okay? So that is the basic presentation of the paths. Okay, so now, is this one off? This one is now off. Is that on now? Okay, I'm going to put this one down, and I hope it doesn't feed back. So the reason why this is important to know this is it's to understand that there are stages that we have to go through in order to eliminate the different types of obscurations, to eliminate the different afflictions. And as you eliminate each different level of affliction, then you're going to also automatically eliminate the types of actions that come out of those afflictions. When you have eliminated all of the discards of seeing through the path of seeing, then there are certain actions you're just not going to do anymore. When you have eliminated all of the discards of desire, you're never going to do any non-virtuous action again, nor will you do any action that is mixed again, because you're free of desire. This is assuming that you're eliminating those discards through the transcendent path, the noble path. You can also eliminate them through, in a temporary fashion, through the worldly paths. But when we're talking about truly eliminating them, we're talking about eliminating them through the worldly paths. So that is just a brief presentation, and we will go through this again tomorrow as we actually go through the what do we call it? Through the actual text on this section. This is described in greater detail, even greater detail, but not with this nice graphics, I have to say, in greater detail in the sixth chapter. Even though it doesn't have the nice graphic, it's better teaching that I'm giving here. But still, this is kind of the easy way to put it. This is a simplified graphic, so you can see the path of seeing and meditation. So we'll go through that tomorrow. But I think that just having this, because we're not going through the sixth chapter this year, and you all might be sitting here wondering what it is for an entire year if we even all survive the next year. So, that is enough for today, and we will continue tomorrow. Tomorrow's Sunday, right? So we have class tomorrow. So now let us please dedicate the merit of teaching and listening to the karma, listening to the Dharma, so that all sentient beings may be freed of karma and what motivates it, karma and its results, of all the sufferings of samsara, and that they may come to the true happiness of Buddhahood. O sanam de tam je se pani tobne nye pedranam pam chene gegana che palap trobai Sipet sole dro wadrol war sho. Thank you.